Well, good morning or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. We're going to give some of our stragglers a little bit more time to join in, but once they join us, we'll get started. So let's give it about another 30 seconds, and then we'll go ahead and get started. We've got a poll up there while we wait for some of these stragglers here. We'll do a couple polls throughout the session, but this helps us better understand the audience and helps kind of cater the demonstration to who we're doing. So I see we've got quite a few IT service providers, managed service providers, but it looks like we also have a bunch of integrators too. So this is great, good stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me move on to the next slide here. Fundamentally, we'll do a couple housekeeping items first. This is a live webinar. We want you guys to ask questions. Take advantage of the GoToWebinar control panel. Type your questions there. I am going to ask that Giancarlo or our team interrupts me if there's a question that's pertinent to what we're talking about. Otherwise, we will get to those at the end. In some instances, we've had so many questions come through that we haven't been able to answer them live, and we'll get to them via email to you after the webinar. But also feel free, if there's something more complex, send us a message, send us an email at support@domotz.com, and our team will respond as quickly as possible. For today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about why Domotz, how Domotz works. Fundamentally, what we want to talk about is your problems, not from a social perspective, but really about how we can help improve some of the business challenges that we hear about from our clients and our customers. How do you, when you go out to find a new customer, how do you assess the network situation that they're in? Once you have service level agreements in place, how can Domotz as a solution help service that better and bring efficiency into your operations? And then ultimately, when the end of that service level agreement comes up, how can we help you renew with that customer? Ultimately, it's about efficiency and standardization, and we'll talk about that. And then Giancarlo, our CTO, at the end is going to talk about some of the new things that we have coming, some of the newer integrations and features that we're working on, and then we'll absolutely get to the Q&A. I do want to let you guys know that we've got a team standing by both on the support as well as sales side. So take advantage of those questions there. Got some pictures of Giancarlo and me in case you guys need to see our pictures. But ultimately, let's talk about Domotz, and then we'll get into a demo. Fundamentally, Domotz is a network monitoring solution. We're absolutely focused on monitoring the network infrastructure of any system that gets deployed. But in reality, we do a lot more, and that's where we see a lot of service providers and commercial integrators taking advantage and scaling their business in ways that they wouldn't have otherwise. We discover all of the devices that are on the network. And more important, we classify those devices. We classify them by make, model, and I think what's so valuable is really type. Letting you know the types of systems that are out there really helps you understand how the job that you're walking into, or really ensuring that what you're setting up and configuring is what you expect to be there, and how these systems affect the network. We're really about monitoring all these systems, so proactively monitoring and alerting when devices on the network are not behaving as you expect. And what's interesting is when they're not behaving, providing you a very secure way to get into that network and manage those devices, whether it's managing the infrastructure itself or logging into the systems that are on there through their management portals, port 80, port 22, the web portals, things like that, Telnet, SSH. That's what we provide you with the capability. Ultimately, it's about how can we help you be more efficient, not only from a deployment perspective of systems, but also generate customer loyalty. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the end as well. So our hope is that we can help you be more efficient and make you look like a hero with your customers. So that being said, let's get out of this presentation and go to the demo. As I mentioned before with some of the polls that we're doing, it's really to help guide us and understand whether you've used us before, seen us, never heard about us. So it looks like we've got a bunch of newbies based on the poll results that I'm seeing, which is awesome. So we'll start at the beginning about how this system works. Fundamentally, there's three parts to Domotz. What I'm showing you on the screen right now is the Domotz application side of it. There's a couple ways in which you can view Domotz. Domotz has a desktop application. What you see here is the desktop app running on a Mac, but there's also a Windows version. We also have a web app. So if you're if you like using your favorite browser, or maybe you're remote somewhere, you can log in with a browser and also kind of see the same user interface. There's also, and I think a lot of people are not aware of this, but there's a lot of power in this, but we have a mobile app as well. The mobile app essentially allows you to carry Domotz with you wherever you go, wherever you are in the world, and getting visibility as well as alerts to systems that are down or troubled sites from anywhere in the world. So we think that that's a very powerful feature within Domotz. The second key part of Domotz is the cloud. The cloud is where all of our intelligence sits. It's where all of the, let's call it the brains of the operation is. It's the cloud that is communicating not only with the desktop app that I'm showing you here on screen, but it's also communicating with this third part of our solution, which is the agent. The agent can come in the forms of, or different forms. There needs to be one agent. And in fact, these dots that you see on the screens here are considered agents for us. There's one agent per network or per site that you are monitoring. The agent can come as a Windows executable. It can come as a Linux or a virtual machine type agent that you can install in a VM if you want. You can install it on Raspberry Pis. It's in embedded systems. Some of them are in various routers. You can find them on NAS drives, so Synology, QNAP, ReadyNAS. So our agent can be deployed in many different ways. By far the most common way is through a Windows executable, but I'll also bring awareness to you that if you guys want to deploy an agent in a very easy form factor and quickly, there's also a box, a Domotz box that's available on Amazon or through some of our distribution partners as well. So that's available to you as well. So there's really those three components. There's the web app that I'm showing you now. There's the cloud itself, and then the agent. By the way, before I get into the demonstration of the application and how it works, we get a lot of questions on the cloud, and I want to point out a few things. Our service is hosted on AWS or Amazon Web Services. We have two different instances of our cloud services, primarily for privacy and security reasons. There's one in North America, and then there's another one in Europe to cover GDPR and really the rest of the world and a lot of the privacy and regulations that are in those regions. We are, just from a global view perspective, we're in over 160 countries. We have thousands of customers that are out there, and those customers are monitoring tens of thousands of networks. So Domotz definitely has large scalability and has been out there. We've been in business since around 2015, and so far we're seeing good upticks in the value and the services that we're offering. So I always wanted to put that out there because we do get questions on that. Let's talk about the application. Let's talk about how we can use this to improve some of the business needs. You know, the first point that I made in the agenda was, how do you assess a customer? We get a lot of questions coming in about, hey, can I use Domotz when I'm walking into a new customer or walking into a job that's out there or a takeover type job? How can I use Domotz to get an understanding of what the network looks like? I think it's a really good question, and Domotz can help you with that. When you deploy a Domotz agent, in fact, we'll just go into one of these agents here. I always use this lab, which fundamentally is my house. The reason I do this is because we have so many IoT devices or network-based systems that you can get a variety or a view of all the things we can do. But when we deploy an agent, the very first thing that happens when you activate that agent with your account is it will immediately start scanning the network. It'll do a layer 2 ARP request, looking for all the MAC addresses that are associated with that network. And then once we find all of those MAC addresses, that's when we start to leverage our database to really understand, okay, of these devices, of these MAC addresses that are out there, what is their make, their model, and the type of device that this is. Of course, we look at other network-based protocols as well. So we go up to layer 3 and understand what the IP address is of this. We'll look at the application layers within the network to see all the different types of broadcasts. So on this particular device, you see Bonjour, you see Zero Conf, but if there are other protocols that are out there that are standards, we'll see those. This is a security camera. And as a matter of fact, we see that it is broadcasting on-viv protocols. So with that, we can start to gather information there, things like firmware version and other stuff that we'll talk about here later. Fundamentally, once we have discovered the devices, we discover what they are, we start to look at which ports are available on this device for management purposes. This particular camera, we see that port 80 and port 8000 representing, web-based ports for management are made available. But in certain instances, we'll also find, in fact, if we go back to the device list, and let's just look at some of these switches that are here. If we discover network switches, often you'll see things like Telnet, SSH that are out there. In the case of PCs, laptops, and servers, you'll also see RDP, or remote desktop protocol, if that's there. So we automatically start to discover those for management purposes. In the case of network infrastructure and switches, we will also start to look at SNMP, so Simple Network Management Protocol, and we'll start to interrogate that infrastructure. Ultimately, what we're doing is we're trying to build a network topology. We're looking at how devices on the network are mapped, how they're all connected. And if I go back into the switch, you'll see that when we show the interfaces, we can see that, okay, these devices are physically connected to these ports. In the case of wireless access points, we'll interrogate the wireless access point here. This is a Ruckus wireless access point, but we'll be able to show things like which clients are connected to which SSIDs, what channels they're on, what radios they're on, and overall, how are they performing. So fundamentally, Domotz starts to interrogate the network infrastructure at the managed switch level, at the firewall level, at the wireless access point, any routers that are there, and we'll use all that information to map this out. Getting back to the problem that we're solving here for you, fundamentally, we're helping you understand what this network looks like. How are things physically connected? What are the types of devices that are connected here? Giving you a good idea of what you're walking into when it comes to a job. I mean, if the customer comes in and says, hey, we have a really simple network, and you do this scan and you see, well, actually it's not as simple as you think, and you can show them how many devices are physically connected, what the structure looks like. Do they have issues within the network from a connectivity point of view? Are there enough WAPs? Are there too many WAPs? These are the types of, this is the type of network infrastructure information that we provide, ultimately helping you know what you're walking into. At the network level, we get a lot of questions about this, and especially service providers who are well-versed in network topology. They want to know, what can we do with respect to VLANs and subnets? Well, first of all, we absolutely can look at different VLANs. Depending on the network that you have and the configuration or the agent that you're using, we show you exactly how to configure Domotz to look across different VLANs. You absolutely can look across different VLANs, and they'll get mapped out on your network as well. You can do subnet scans. So to dive into the layer network layer discussions, VLANs are really a layer 2 technology. Subnetting is really a layer 3, so you're dealing with IP addresses. A lot of people know that when you do a VPN, VPNs are very much a layer 3 technology. Of course, you can do some let's call it software and some games where you can put VPNs across layer 2, but that's usually on much more advanced systems. But Domotz can look across subnets, that can look across VPNs. It's just you're doing it at an IP address level as opposed to a MAC address level. Another thing that you'll see is that we can look at external hosts. So here I've set up some examples like Blue Jean servers or Comcast, or even looking at things like Cloudflare and Google to see how they're performing and do I have connectivity to those. Looking at things like Blue Jeans or Zoom is really, really useful, especially in today's work from home environment. When you have executives or you have customers who need to work from home but be connected back to the office, making sure that from the homeowner's point of view that they can actually reach that network and it can be monitored is one effective way in which Domotz gets leveraged by many of our customers. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can leverage Domotz to really assess what's going on. We'll dive into some of the details of some of these things and some other problems, but I think it really does address that first fundamental question of how does Domotz, one, discover devices, how does it look at the network, and how can I use that information for understanding what's going on in a client's system? The next question that I posed was really around service level agreements. Once you have a customer in place, once you've talked to customers, at that point you're looking at and you have an agreement in place with them that you're going to monitor their systems for the next couple of months, years, whatever it may be. The question really comes down to how can Domotz help you be more efficient? One of the things that service level agreements do is it really puts an understanding between you and the customer about response times to problems and what it is you're going to manage in their systems. That's exactly where I think proactive monitoring within Domotz becomes so powerful. Once we've discovered all the devices, the very next thing that you can do is start to put alerts in place with these devices. Our goal is to help you understand when there's a problem on the network before you get a phone call from your customer. Nobody wants to get the phone call that says, hey, my system is down and it's super urgent, right? If you can know beforehand and you can be proactive, we really do think it helps you, like I said before, become a hero. Different types of alerts. We have what we call network alerts as well as device alerts. Network alerts relate to the network itself, primarily looking at, is the network service down? Are we seeing new devices on the network? Are there security issues? And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail at the end. But are there things like open ports or port forwarding going on that you wouldn't expect to have happen? Or what's the ISP performance, right? Is it going above or is it going below a particular threshold that concerns you? Those are the types of network alerts that we are looking at. From a device alert, you're really looking at each individual device on the network and customizing the types of alerts that you can see there. So if we'll go into a particular camera here. For alerts, you can set up whether the device goes up or down, if it loses heartbeats, which are essentially pings. By the way, I think it's important that I point out here that for the most part, unless you have a very critical infrastructure device, using a heartbeat lost is not as effective as using the device goes down type of alert. A heartbeat is essentially every 30 seconds we're pinging that device, and if one of those gets lost, then we can alert you. You can imagine under complex networks that heartbeats get lost all the time. So using the device goes down is a more effective way to minimize the alerts that you're getting. So I just wanted to make that note to you guys. IP address changes. So if you have a device that's on a static reservation or even a static IP, if you see that change, that can be a sign of spoofing. It could be another network issue, so you can alert on that. You also can alert on things like what we call internally, we use the term eyes over here, which we'll talk about, but that is about monitoring TCP services. So in this particular camera, not only am I monitoring the network interface, but I'm also monitoring the processes that's running on that device. So I'm looking at port 80 and I'm seeing if the web server on that page is still running. If the web server ever goes down on that device, I can generate an alert. It's very possible, and in many systems like control systems or some more advanced embedded systems, a lot of times the network card can be running and it can be responding to ICMP requests or pings, but the system itself may be down, maybe in a locked state. checking on TCP services is a great way to ensure that the system itself is still up and running and functioning properly. SNMP is another very powerful tool. A lot of IT departments and a lot of service providers leverage SNMP all the time, whether it's to check for CPU utilization, memory consumption, runtime associated with UPSs or universal power, uninterruptible power supplies, excuse me. Great ways to use SNMP. In fact, looking at temperature and humidity within racks is another commonly used thing. In fact, I think we'll show some of that here later. So you can set up SNMP alerts. You can look at values. You can look at strings. You also can look at the network performance of the device itself. So looking at things like latency or packet loss to that device as seen by the Domotz agent, it's another great way to monitor performance. In fact, let me do this. I will show you guys a particular system that just recently within my house is having some trouble. And looking at things like pings or historical pings is a great example of identifying troubled situations. So here you can see that the network and everything seemed to be running fairly normal. We had average latencies somewhere around 150 milliseconds or so. But then at some point around mid-November, we started having issues. And now around November 24th, I'm getting packet drops all the time. All these gray bars are indicative of packet drops. Going back and looking at some things in a little bit more detail, when I looked at what happened, I actually did a firmware update to that TV back in mid-November, which I find interesting that all of a sudden when I did that update around this time frame, it started correlating to some of these issues. I need to look at more detail on what's going on in my system, but this is a very good way to start looking at troubled devices and recognizing when behaviors on the network are changing from what you would expect. And Domotz can alert you to that. I need to go do the debugging and taking the time to go find out what's going on, but I thought it was rather interesting that all of a sudden started happening within the last 2 weeks. So those are the types of device alerts that are out there. I want to point out one more thing when it comes to alerts, helping you with proactive monitoring. And that has to do with what's called shared alerts. You probably noticed that the alerts we have here on this page can go to mobile or push notifications to your app, or it can go to the email address, whatever you're logged in as on your application or on your system. We also have this notion of what we call shared alerts. The same type of alerts that we're pushing to email or to your phone can be done into ticketing systems. So things like Autotask, ConnectWise's Manage, Synchro, Zendesk are all great examples of PSA tools that are out there where when an alert occurs, we can automatically open up a ticket. The beauty of these shared alerts into ticketing systems is not only do we provide you information about the site and the device itself, but if that device or that alert has ever opened up a ticket previously, we're going to pass that information along as well, showing you and linking to the historical record of that ticket that was opened previously. We think this type of integration really helps you. We recognize that you as a service provider, you're not necessarily looking at the Domotz dashboard all the time. It's more likely that you're using a professional services administration tool to interface with your customers more often than not. We think giving you easy integration into those types of tools is very powerful. And I'm happy to say that at the end of this, Giancarlo is, I think, going to talk about some of the other work that we're doing and more of these channels, as we call them, that we're integrating with. You'll also notice that another method of shared alerts is what we call webhooks. We can we can show data or push messages into messaging systems like Slack or Microsoft Teams. If you have other services, things like Zapier, where you want to do more automation, you can actually push notifications into those services that can then parse and do automated functionality or create tickets in other systems. So that's another powerful use of webhooks. Emails, if you want to just go to a shared alert, maybe you have a shared email, maybe you have something like support@mycompany.com that you want to push an email to just in general so that a team of people can see that. You can do that as well through shared alerts. So all in all, it's really important to point out that from a service level agreement perspective and being proactive with your customers, Domotz provides you with a lot of tools to look at not only the network infrastructure itself, but all of the devices that are on that network. And you really can take these alerts or events that happen on the network and push them into the tools that you're using on a daily basis. So that brings us really to what happens when I have an alert, right? What do I do when something happens there? Well, this is where we get into that remote connectivity aspect. One of the things you may have noticed on this dashboard is we have the ability to connect. And in fact, if we look at this switch, there's a couple ways in which we can connect to every single device that's on the network. The first thing is we can do a direct connection to that device. When I make this connection here, what it does is it will open up a page. It's essentially creating a secure tunnel between my laptop, which is at the office, and the Domotz cloud, right, that AWS hosted service. And then it's creating another secure connection down to the agent itself that's sitting on that network. You can see that this URL that's up here is unique. If you guys can copy and paste that and try it, you're not going to gain access. That's unique to my laptop. I can't even pass that to a neighbor that's sitting next to me in the office on the same WAN IP address. It will not work. It's unique to my laptop. But with this, I've created a secure connection that takes me directly into the switch. I can now go in and configure things as needed. I guess if I looked at membership, it might be more useful. If I needed to go in and save off configuration files, which we'll talk about that a little bit, I can do that right from here. So I now have this secure direct connection right to that device. The other thing that we can do within Domotz is, and by the way, while those are the basic ports that I connected to, so I can do the same thing with command line interface with Telnet and SSH, I also can create a connection to a secure or a separate port. So if I wanted to go add my own custom connection, something that we didn't discover, maybe it's something that you configured separately, but it's an HTTPS connection on port 3500. You can go create that connection here and use the tools for that. You also, and this is really important when it comes to more embedded systems or things like control systems and lighting systems, I can open up, let's call it a socket, to a port, and I can create this TCP tunnel directly to that. What we're going to do when we create this connection, so let's just randomly create a number here and hit connect. What will happen is Domotz is going to provide me with a URL that I can then take and copy this URL directly into a tool, right, the third-party tool. So in instances like Crestron, Savant, AMX, Extron, right, these are all systems where I can take this URL, put it into their programming system or their control system, and then create a secure connection over the Domotz ecosystem and the secure tunnels. It allows you to gain access and program these systems without having to be on site. So we think this is a nice, powerful way to integrate third-party tools as well. Now, if you don't want to do that, let's remove this since it's not really there. You can also, through Domotz, create what we have, or create a VPN on demand. Essentially, a VPN is a virtual private network. We turn the Domotz agent that's on that network into a VPN host. You can then open up a tunnel. I won't do it here since we're on this webinar, but if I created this tunnel, it would essentially give me a configuration file that I could then take my a client, like here I have a tunnel blick, where I can add that configuration file to it and then create that secure connection from my laptop onto that network. The nice thing about that is I now have access to all the devices on that network. So if I wanted to do firmware updates to multiple devices, if I wanted to pull configuration files from multiple switches or whatever may be on that system, I can do that directly through Domotz. Again, this is a way from a service level agreement perspective that not only are we monitoring devices actively, but if you need to go in and reconfigure, if you need to go power cycle, if you need to reboot systems, we can create connections into that environment that makes it quicker and more efficient for you. Speaking of rebooting, I didn't mention this earlier, but I think it's important that I point this out. From a network perspective, you probably noticed that when we see network devices that are PoE based, we absolutely can power cycle these systems through the network interface. So we can do that. We also can, if we go to PDUs, when we discover different types of PDUs that are out there, power distribution units, we also can configure those outlets. In fact, let's go to one where it's actually configured. I think the SurgeX one. You can associate devices that are on the network, or even dummy devices that are not on the network, like this Optima projector here is not on the network, but we know it's tied to outlet 4. If we have trouble with these devices, we can power cycle them right here through the Domotz interface. I'm not a huge advocate of just randomly power cycling things to fix problems, but I'm pretty certain that all of us understand the fact that when we're in a desperate situation, a lot of times the first thing that we do is power cycle the device to see if it comes back. Domotz gives you the ability to do that very quickly and easily. Again, trying to resolve a problem in the near term so that, again, it puts puts people at ease and they can go back to work in this case. But ultimately, my opinion is you probably want to find out why it was getting into that state. And if it's getting into a bad state too often, maybe you should do a little bit more debugging. But that's a side note there. So we've talked about proactive monitoring. We've talked about the remote connectivity here. A couple of things that I think I should mention here as well is, and I kind of alluded to it on when we talked about the switch, but one of the things, in fact, let's go to this environment here where we've got some Cisco systems. So one of the things that Domotz does as well, especially since we primarily look at the network infrastructure, is we can look at the configuration files on the network devices. The nice thing about this is that we are looking at the running configuration of a network switch, and we are saving that off into our cloud. We're doing that once every 6 hours. If we see a change to that running configuration, we're not only going to save off the new configuration as well, but we're going to alert you to the fact that there was a change. And then we're going to go as far as showing you the differences, right? What did change? Obviously here in this case, a VLAN got added to the switch configuration. The nice thing about this for you is if a change occurs, you now have a history of it. If a change occurred and it wasn't what you expected, you actually have a backup of it that you can now restore from. This is a very, very powerful, not only from managing a customer's expectation and the network infrastructure, which really is the spine of their business in many cases, but it's also there to help you if you want to take this configuration and replicate it on new devices that come in, or even different sites. If you have a customer that at one site, they've been working, but now they've expanded to a new site and you want to take that configuration and move it over, very easy to do that. One other thing I'll say here is if you ever have a misalignment of the running configuration from the startup configuration, which I'm sure a lot of you are laughing when I say that right now because you've done it. You've gone in and made configuration changes, but you forgot to save it to the startup configuration. We're going to alert you when that happens, and we're going to let you know that there was a deviation from it. The nice thing is even if you left that office and you're now back at your own office, the good thing is you can log into Domotz, log into that device, and save the backup right there for you. So a lot of power when it comes to configuration management of network-based systems out there as well. So that's another good point. Okay, so the fundamentals of Domotz, I think we've discussed. We've talked about how it alerts you when system goes down, how you can manage these devices. There's something here that I really like to talk about. I think Giancarlo probably gets tired of me hearing it, but it's really about how do you keep customers coming back. Once that SLA has expired, what can you do? And we'll talk about this, but I like to bring up the recovery paradox. The recovery paradox is really it's about customer loyalty. And what it says is that loyalty from a customer naturally increases over time. But when there's an issue, when a problem occurs on that with that customer, it may not even be your fault, but inevitably what happens, if some system on that network goes down, they're going to look to you as that service provider, and they're going to blame you for that until you can prove otherwise. But what's interesting about this paradox is that if you communicate with that customer, if you tell them what happened, if you resolve the problem quickly, if you put things in place that help you not have that issue again, what you see is that the loyalty from the customer actually increases or improves. Now, it's a little running joke amongst my colleagues here that I don't want you going out and causing failures just so this to happen, because that won't work. But if you can have tools in your portfolio of tricks that help you respond quicker and more effectively, this recovery paradox becomes beneficial to you. And when it does come time to sign up that customer again, you're going to be in a better position. Domotz is a tool that allows you to do that. Okay, and I think you can see that not only from the proactive alerts, but also the ways in which we can manage and minimize downtime with that customer. But there's something else that has to happen, and I think it's about reporting. One of the things that Domotz does is we will log and report all the activities that go on within the Domotz environment. So anytime that you log into a system, anytime that you power cycle a system, we're going to log that information. We do that for auditing purposes. So you can see here, just today on this demo, right? I created that TCP tunnel, even though it was random, but it said I opened it up. Here's the time, the date, who did it. All of this is captured. So it's really important from an auditing perspective. If I want to add notes about things in the system, I can do that. We also can generate reports either manually or on an automatic basis. Those reports can go to any number of emails that you want to put in the system or for this particular agent. You can flag things like what's the status of the device, what's the connection history, are important devices in troubled states or not, what's the latency of things. So this is all information. In fact, that activity log that's there, you can also generate in these reports. The beauty of these reports as well is not only can you automate them to come out at the beginning of each month, but these reports aren't from Domotz. These reports are really from you and your information. In fact, you guys may have noticed that on this page, this logo that's up here, Cool Cat, that can be your logo. You can go set up account and branding information within Domotz that not only does this multi-tenant view of the NOC-like view, the Network Operations Center view, have your logo, but these reports can also have your branding and logo information so that it really looks like it's coming from you. You, of course, can send it to yourself. You can modify the data as you want. And in fact, one more thing, I'm going to show you two things here on this report. One of the things you can do as well is just export a lot of this information to a CSV file. One thing I didn't show you that I'm going to go back and show you now, under the Devices tab, when we've discovered all of these devices, we also can export all this information to an Excel file. And once it does this, let me, we'll save this off here. And I will go open up Excel. I should have done this earlier so we didn't have to waste time with this. But let's go to my Mac, go to the desktop since I believe that's where I saved it. And then once it's come up, so I'll drag it onto the screen here. Okay, so this report that was generated, you'll notice there's a lot of information within this report, not only on the device name, the IP address, the MAC address, but also all the information like the type. Well, what's great about this is if I want to search for all the cameras that are out there, I can do that. I can see these cameras. If I want to change their importance level, if I want to make them not important, I want to make it false instead of true. If I want to add notes, maybe I want to put in information like the username and password or some details about that, I can save that in this Excel file. Once I do that, I then can, oh, sorry, let's close it, assuming I saved it. So I'll just hit don't save in this case. But then what I can do is I can actually import that information back into the system. So any of the changes that I made, whether it was zone information, location information, user notes, all of that can be imported back into this agent immediately.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, Giancarlo.
Sorry to interrupt, because we had a question about that. One thing is important to mention when you do that kind of stuff, the import back, is if you have also the any alert configured, or for instance, any SNMP monitoring and alerts on those SNMP monitoring.
Yep. You're saying that gets brought in as well, Giancarlo?
Oh, well, yeah, when you do the import of configuration. Oh, we'll check later. Don't worry. Okay. Sorry for that.
Sure. No, I appreciate you chiming in. Don't forget to chime in if people have questions, by the way. So you know how I get to talking, and I just keep talking. So going back to keeping that customer for life, right? Keeping them coming back, right? The idea behind this is leveraging a tool like Domotz to continuously communicate with the customer, we think is very valuable. The reporting, the logging, right? Those are all ways in which you should maintain communication. And ultimately, about that recovery paradox, how can you let them know what it is you've done? I want to encourage all of you that even when nothing's going wrong in a customer system, and nothing's gone wrong for 2 months, I absolutely encourage you to maintain communication and keep talking to those guys, because that is what helps you build that rapport and keep that loyalty coming. So lots of good information there. The last topic that we really addressed before we get into some of the newer things that we have and get into some of the Q&A is really about efficiency and standardization, and how we can help you as a service provider, you as an integrator, better understand what's going on. First of all, standardizing. We think that it's really important for you to leverage the same tools across all your customers. I'm sure you guys have been in situations where, maybe early on in your business, where you've provided customers with this network switch and another customer with a different network switch, and then some of them were using this form of software and others were using different forms. It creates a headache for you. What we want to do is make it so that you can leverage a common tool or a single tool, maybe not a single, but at least one type of tool within your environment. We think that the pricing of Domotz at $19 a month really makes it easy for you to scale and deploy Domotz into every single job that you're doing. Okay, so that's one thing that I think is really important. It's a flat fee that's out there. You're being charged per site. You're not being charged per network device. You're not being charged, per infrastructure that's out there. It's really on a flat fee per site that's out there. Again, you can look across multiple VLANs, across multiple subnets. It's how you deploy it and what's efficient for you. We do have some customers that will put a Domotz agent per conference room because they're focused on, those systems within that conference room. And fine, go ahead and do that. But it's easy for you guys to scale that way. One of the other things that we do from a tool perspective, and I talked about how Domotz may not be the obvious dashboard for you. You may want to use that PSA tool, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But one of the things that we provide you is a way that you can better understand across all of the customers. If you're dealing with, tens, hundreds, or even thousands of customers, Domotz can search across customers. So here we're searching for devices. I just chose the word Cisco, but here you can see all of the agents that have leveraged the word Cisco. I can do the same thing actually. So if I wanted to put the word main, anywhere that the word main is used across these agents will show up. You may notice on this particular site, the word main's not obvious, but if I go into the device and I start to look at the bonjour names or the zero comp names, you'll notice that main is shown there. So not only are we just scanning at the high level information, but we're really diving into the details and doing searches across the whole system. Why is this management tab so important? It does a couple things for you. So first and foremost, if you want to understand the status, right? How many of my customers have Cisco SG350 managed switches? Very easy to search across that. You can even do advanced searches where you can say, not only does it have the word main, but it's of this model type or it's this manufacturer, right? So we can do those types of detailed searches. But then if you can start to look at, okay, how are these systems configured? In fact, let's go back to Cisco. So when I type Cisco, I think if we select, oops, if I select one of these devices, we'll start to show information about the properties within Domotz on each of these devices. Are there SNMP sensors configured? Are there services configured? What's the status check, right? What's the authentication of these devices? Are they important or not? What I can do with this, right, when I look at a single device, okay, I can actually export all that information, and I can export it to my computer. It'll save off as a file. But then what I can do is take that information and I can select, you know, the other devices, just random devices here, but I can then import all of that information that I pulled off into those new devices. This is a beautiful way to help scale across multiple sites very quickly. If you have a particular customer, let's say you've got a franchisee that owns 5 different stores that you're monitoring all their stores or their restaurants, you can easily search for, you know, of this customer, you know, these are their sites. Let's say they change their name. I can go select all these. I can go edit their name all at once and make mass changes to lots of devices or networks at one time. Okay, so these are just powerful ways in which Domotz allows you to scale and be more efficient in your systems, and we think it really helps with deployment. So hopefully from today's demo, you guys have seen quite a bit. One, you've seen how the NOC view, this multi-tenant view that we have here, gives you visibility into all your customers. We've talked about how we discover devices. We've talked about how we can set alerts on these devices and interface those alerts into the PSA tools that you're using or the messaging systems that you're using. We've talked about connectivity and how you can remotely manage these systems, whether it's from logging into the system itself or power cycling the devices through PDUs or the managed switches. And we've talked about at a high level, you know, some of the global management capabilities. I think with that, I think we should turn it over to Giancarlo. In fact, Giancarlo, before I do that, I know one thing that you always tell me I forget, and I forgot it again, are APIs. We should talk about
You
this.
know what? This is exactly one thing that it is addressing one question we were just receiving from on the question line. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
The question was actually, how can I build my own dashboard or something that I can put on a monitor or a screen? And that's basically,
Perfect.
yeah, you address that.
Perfect timing, perfect timing. Well, let me say this and then you can add to it as well. Everything that I've shown you today through our web app and whether it's the web app or the desktop app, like I was showing you, is available through these public APIs. And we recognize the fact, to the question that you just got there, Giancarlo, our dashboard, our view may not be exactly what you need. You may want to simplify it. You may want to make it more complex. You can take advantage of these public APIs to get access to all your agents that are there. You can list all the devices within the agents. You can generate reports on these agents. In fact, you can go as far as setting up alerts through these APIs and getting status of SNMP sensors. In fact, one thing, this OnVIF snapshot, Giancarlo, I always like to show this. A lot of people don't realize some of the capabilities that we have from a camera point of view, but it's very easy for us to, when we discover a device is on VIV protocol based, we can do things like not only check that it's online, but we can grab a snapshot of it. Very powerful for service providers, especially if they want to increase revenue streams, if they want to not only monitor the cameras, but then generate reports that show that they're actively working and functioning as expected. This is something that can be done not only through our dashboard, but also through these APIs. So Giancarlo, is there any other comments you want to make on that?
No, that's basically addressing that question. And I would like to mention here something that brings me to the other discussion. In next week, we will have a technical webinar which will cover partially the usage of public API, but it will also cover how to integrate Domotz easily with a platform called Node-RED, for instance, to build a dashboard using the Node-RED platform, which is kind of easy to, it's a low-code platform for developing solutions or interfacing solutions and so on. So that's something coming next week. So if you're interested in that topic, make sure you subscribe, and as JB is showing, to this webinar next week.
Yeah, December 10th. Yeah, so visit domotz.com, and under our resources, you'll find webinars. So yeah, I definitely want to have people sign up for that. That's been our engineers that have done those demos, and they've been very good, very well received. So yeah. What other, well, Giancarlo, do you want to focus on questions, or do you want to focus on some of the new things that are coming out?
There are a few questions that I would like to cover, and then I will briefly mention what's next. So the first question I want to mention, there have been tens of questions. Let me select a few of them. So Don is asking, how is the security on the Domotz box? I would mention that security was one of our, let's say, the pillar of our software, and being there since the day one, we really spent more time in security and automatic testing since the first day, rather than let's say implementing feature in the first days. But we are still continuing to look into that one, and once we design this new box, the Domotz box, we also took the security into consideration. Worth to mention, there is a well-done page, a white paper on our website. If you search for Domotz security, you'll get to that web page. We explain our security principle, why we care, but also why the Domotz box is secure. It has been designed around an OS called Ubuntu Core. Ubuntu Core is an operating system from Canonical, designed for IoT platform in general. And the first thing that they state in their website is the security again. We have also periodically we have a security assessment done not only against our cloud infrastructure, but also against our Domotz box and our client in general, so the web app and the mobile app. This has been done periodically. As I said, we have huge enterprise among our customers, and they're really worried about that. They want everything in place, all this paperwork to be done, and security assessment, vulnerability scan, and so on.
Well, and Giancarlo, correct me if I'm wrong, we just did one recently, and if I'm not mistaken, we passed.
It's a very correct statement, JP.
Good.
We have all green around our cloud infrastructure and around our Domotz box.
Excellent.
Yeah. One question from Sean was asking, I don't know if we mentioned the price during the webinar, but he was asking, is really $20 per month give me access to an unlimited nodes or to be monitored in my network? And the answer is yes, it's actually $19 per month. It gives you access to all the devices that can be discovered on that local network. There are some caveats.
I'm willing to charge Sean $20 though, if he wants.
Oh yeah.
That extra dollar if he wants that.
Yeah, that's good. There are a few caveats. I mean, when we mention the network, as JB was mentioning, we scan the network on a layer 2, which provides access to MAC address and so on. But you can add multiple VLANs, which are still in the layer 2. Make sure you add VLANs if the subnets that you want to add are connected on layer 2. If they are layer 3 routed subnet, we also offer a capability of scanning on layer 3. You lose the capability of having MAC addresses. You only have IP addresses there, but still you can add as many devices as you want. And this addressed another question from Dan, I think, was asking, how can I make I have Domotz that add devices as soon as they are added on the network? Domotz already does that. I mean, it periodically scans the network every 30 seconds.
Yeah. And I think I didn't mention it in great detail, but under the alert setting, a device discovery. In fact, we really didn't, Giancarlo, I have to apologize. We didn't talk about the network security tab here.
Very good point. Yeah.
But this is an important aspect where we are looking for not only new devices that are there, but ports being opened and generating alerts when those things happen. So Yes, whenever a new device is discovered, you absolutely can generate an alert on that.
Very, very good. Now, speaking about that, it brings me to the next stage. What's next? What's coming next? And you mentioned about the security, and we mentioned about also new devices discovered on the network. If you click again on the security tile, network security tile, in 1 week, actually in a few days, probably. So the user will see a new section here where the new devices discovered on the network will be reported, sorted by the time that they join the network, so that you can be notified, and visually also on the Domotz app and the Domotz web app, you'll be notified if there are new devices on the network. It's something coming new next week. Before going to the other things that are coming new, yeah, only 5 minutes. Another question is, and probably we didn't cover that. What about one side of the network? It's a question from Eve. So I don't know if we show that part. Sorry, but I was focusing sometimes on the
network performance perspective.
Yeah.
So a couple things that we do. I did not show it. You know, a lot of times service providers, I think while they're interested in it, they don't necessarily own the WAN side. But what we do here is effectively the Domotz agent itself can use services like FAST from Netflix, or MLab is the one that I see more commonly, but we can issue network speed tests. Essentially what we're looking at is the performance. Now, again, I leverage my home for a lot of these demos, and I have gigabit service here, but you can see that within the last couple of weeks, my service has gone down. This is something where reporting on this is really useful, because what I should do is call Comcast and say, hey, what's going on with my network? Or I should reboot my router, my router and my modem to maybe fix this.
Yep. Very, very good. Yeah.
Giancarlo, I'm sorry, I wanted to mention one more thing that we do. So I mentioned earlier about the external host. I did talk about that, right? What can be set up here. This is another effective way. So let's just do a search for Blue Jeans here. So this is another effective way to look at performance of the network, where I'm essentially pinging that external service and looking for round trip delay from the agent out to that server and back. So this is also very useful, and you can see I had issues where it became out. So just again, this is another way in which you can leverage Domotz to test external speeds.
Yeah, thanks a lot, JB, for covering that. So I have probably covered most of the question. One thing I did not see, did it show under the manage how users can import back configuration and settings from different devices?
I did.
Okay.
That's Cisco is the
perfect
example here, where we can
great
the device settings, and then we can save that off to new devices or re-import that. Great for templating, right?
Exactly, great for template, and if you set alerting on a specific device, and that same device or same type of device you have on every single site, you can import back to every single site for that specific device.
Yeah, Giancarlo, one of the things that you and I always talk about when we talk about that are the SNMP like monitoring as well. And I didn't show anybody this. I think it's important to do this. SNMP within Domotz is actually quite powerful. So, and a lot of times I say this because everybody knows that SNMP can be complex to set up. If I go to add an SNMP sensor, a lot of times you have to know the MIB and the OID. But here, what Domotz has done is we made it very easy to search based off of common words like temperature in this case. We can add this device. Now I already have it added, so I won't add it, but by searching for temperature, we know that this device has a specific MIB. We have thousands of MIBs in our database that we search across, but then we can bring up this information. Once you attach this, you then can start to monitor this and even look at it historically, right? We'll do 30 days worth of data on these OIDs. And you can of course set alerts on these. This type of information can actually be replicated through that managed system very easily. So I don't think I went into details on that, but I should have.
Perfect. Okay, I have this window here. So now let me cover briefly in a couple of minutes. Actually, I want to talk about new features, and actually one of these features was there since last week is the integration with the single sign-on platform like Azure Active Directory, Cloud Jump, or Okta. So as JP is showing here, you can basically now integrate or connect your master account with Azure, Okta, or Jump Cloud, and then have all your team member that authenticate through that security assertion markup language that you use on your company. At the same time, we have also improved the way you can manage two-factor authentication for your whole team. So you can set up two-factor authentication for yourself, for your account, but you can also manage or enforce two-factor authentication for all of your team members, or you can leave them choose of setting that up. That's something that came very recently. I mentioned about the latest devices that are registered into the to an agent or discovered by an agent. This is coming very soon. Another thing that is coming very soon is an integration with WatchGuard in terms of configuration management. JP showed that we are able to extract configuration file from Cisco, from Blackstone, from other networking switches. We are now adding firewalls. First one will be WatchGuard, then we will add FortiGate, SonicWall. Then going back to the switches, we will add also Juniper OS and HP Aruba. So we will be able to extract the configuration file, save historically, and allow you to see differences and so on. In terms of integration with external tool for ticketing system, let me mention something because there was a question. Whenever you configure an agent, you have access to all the functionality, including the alerting. You can use webhooks, you can use integration with Microsoft Teams, you can use integration with Slack, or you can receive email notification. That's all included in the agent. There are a few integration with names like ConnectWise or Datto, where there is a certified integration process in place, and there is a let's say an add-on required for those kind of integration. But the rest of the integration, they're all included there. So what's next in terms of integration with ticketing system? Freshdesk is coming very soon. Early next week should be in place, and then we will work on ticketing system like ServiceNow, actually a wider system like ServiceNow, and then Jira, Zoho, CRM. They're all on our roadmap. Okay. And one more thing we added, we didn't have yet the time to, let's say, send a note or release notes, is the possibility to install the Domotz agent and configure the Domotz agent on Windows machine, but from command line. Why that matters is because you might be familiar with other RMM solution. You have already your Windows PC or server remotely running and manage it through that RMM solution. You can now configure your RMM to install Domotz and configure Domotz remotely, all with one single script. Okay,
yeah,
finally.
That's a nice addition, Giancarlo, yeah.
Thanks. And then finally, what's next? Oh, the development team is working on an integration with IT Glue, and I'm sure that many of you that are in the MSP space are familiar with that tool. We have worked with IT Glue for a few months now, dealing whether we should do the integration on our side or on their side. Technically speaking, it was, let's say, from an architectural point of view, better having the integration on their side, but actually at the end we will do on our side. We also review the design with some of the MSP, and it is coming very, very nice. And then a few other things that are coming probably early next year. We will start looking more and more in the monitoring of DHCP server, and monitoring if there are multiple DHCP server, which might be an issue, or other parameters in the DHCP server. And the last thing, we are looking into the syslog integration, so how to have Domotz, the agent, collecting the syslog, parse them, and provide to the cloud the relevant part of the syslog that might be useful for alerting purposes and so on. Wow, that was long. And Yeah, we are continuing to add feature really every 1 or 2 weeks, so stay tuned. If you can subscribe to next webinar in 2 weeks, you will probably discover more and more feature.
Yeah, and definitely be sure to check us out next week with the Node-RED discussion.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's going to be a really, really good one. And I love it when our engineers get in front of the audience and talk about the details. You can ask them complex questions. So thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Hope you learned a lot. If there's more information you guys want to get or things that you want to see more details on, send a message either to support@domotz.com, or you can also email sales if you have more sales related questions. So sales@domotz.com. Thanks again for attending. Giancarlo, thanks for manning those questions with the team. And we look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.